What's up? My name's Ryan, and in this video we're going to try and build a terminal native plugin that shows recent updates from our changelog on your terminal. So it's going to be a nice meta plugin. Our changelog is currently behind our logged in paywall. There is an RSS feed that anyone can subscribe to, but if you want to see this, you have to be logged in for now. So let's change that and make it available without a web browser. What I'm going to do first is figure out what I want this to look like, because I think that's really the fun part. And if I head over to our recipes tab to look at some of the recent public launches, one that I kind of like is actually, New York Times is kind of our go-to. But one thing that I thought was nice for showing a lot of information is this GitHub issues one. It's got kind of like checkboxes. It's got different levels of dithering patterns for like new versus old. And when I think about a notifications feed inside of an application, like a top right drop down number 2 for 2 things that are new, I'm kind of reminded of this because maybe we could show new stuff in bold and older stuff in a lighter gray. So I think this is going to be what I want to use. To do that, I'm just going to fork this plugin, give it a nice save unless these fields are required. And then I'm going to go into the markup editor to just rip this down. And thank you for building this. So this is our markup. You can see it's just going to loop through what is going to be each of our changelog entries, and it's got some JavaScript bindings right here, which allow us to show stuff like 3 more remaining that are out of the list, which I'll show you in a moment. So this is going to be our markup, and if I zoom out a little bit, I can get this side by side, or I can even go pop out and kind of make this look a little bit more like an e-ink screen. And I can actually grab the markup from all the different layouts, which is nice. So that's what I want it to look like. Let's start by building out the front end in a demo environment. So let me go over here to my text editor, and we are building a changelog plugin. I'm going to simply run my server, and I'm going to show you this demo page. So plugin/demo, anyone can access this in production. You can click on a plugin and you'll see it render all of our different layouts with demo data. If you had connected, let's say, Hacker News yourself, you could then append data true and you would see it populate with your data. So this is accessible to everyone. And the reason is because we use this ourselves to quickly develop plugins without waiting for images to be rendered. So I'm going to go to where we keep that demo data, demoable, and here I'm using my highly modern text editor called Atom. And I'm going to just go down to the bottom. This is not a linted file, obviously, and I'm going to just call this changelog, and I'm going to give it an instance name, which will default to put down in our title bar, but it's not necessary, and you're welcome to turn it off. And I'm just going to call it changelog, and maybe I can do something like items and just give it something basic. If I go to our actual changelog, you can see we have a date, we have a title, and then we have some text. So maybe I just go with that for now. Great. So now we've got sort of basically a JSON payload that we're going to want to iterate through in our front end views. And so to do that in our Rails 8 app views, plugins, the key name of the plugin, I suppose we'll just call this changelog. So I'm going to make a folder to hold all of those views. And we use a templating language called ERB, which is pretty similar to just using Liquid or Angular or Vue style, but it works like this. And that's about the main difference. And in here, I can go ahead and grab that markdown that we like from this, except I will need to make some changes because, again, it's not Liquid. So instead, I'll do something like items.each. And this is just embedded Ruby. Now this I don't actually care about. I'm just going to let this be broken for now. And we're going to see what happens when I try to go to changelog full in my browser. Nice. So we've got that. And was hoping to see something more interesting, but that's okay. So now we've got the basics stubbed out. I want to go ahead and actually generate this plugin. For that, we have a native tool called Plugins Generator. And I'm going to run Rails G plugin, and I'm going to name it Changelog. It is news from terminal. It's really not any type of input. Users won't need to add any custom settings. Global, yes, because if user A and user B turn this on, it should be the same graphic for both of them. By marking plugins global, we save ourselves a lot of compute and unnecessary screen generation. Now I'm going to add some categories. We can just call this news for now, but we can add multiple categories. And this only really needs to update a couple times a day max. So I'm going to do 720 for every 12 hours. I'm going to override that file. And so we will need to just recreate this full file again. I can look at it once I run my server. So what this has done is it's created a changelog service. This is where we're going to put all of our magic logic, which will generate the JSON payload. The example is here. We're going to generate this dynamically from here. Next, we've got that whole folder full of templates, which are going to basically mimic what you see here, these different templates. And next, we've got a stub file called changelog spec, which is just where we're going to write some tests for our test suite. Finally, we have an SVG, which we'll need to replace with something that feels newsy or changeloggy. So let's try to first make our backend actually lay out data the way we want. So here we kind of came up with a couple things, like maybe an items payload. So I'll just say items. I'll get rid of this private for now. And then let's define items. And it's just going to be the same way we define it on our announcements page. So that's run by our announcements controller /news at this endpoint. We look through our cache, and actually, let's look at our news endpoint, news controller. And there we go. We're just grabbing announcements newest to oldest. I'm local, so let's see what kind of crazy fake announcements I have in here. Nothing too crazy. Title, body, obviously they have dates. So this is not a bad start. We don't need all of these attributes, created at, updated at. So let's first grab, make a helper for just our announcements. And I'm going to memoize this so that in case we want to reference it multiple times, we're not rerunning the SQL query. And I also don't want to get too many. Now, on this page here, News Controller, we use a pagey gem that wraps around our query and optimizes for pagination. It has basically a built-in limit. We can just do something very simple here, such as limit 10, and we'll be good to go. If we think we can fit more, we'll increase this limit. We also can, if we want, make this a user-facing toggle later. So I can just go ahead and hard code this to 10 for now. And then that way later we could swap this out with something like settings limit from the user. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to just do a quick hash map of our announcements that only has the data we care about. We don't care about the primary key ID or updated at. So we're just going to get that done. And we can really make it look the same way we made it look right here. Now dates, some of you are going to be very opinionated about this date format. So we may want to add a date formatting dropdown. We have many plugins with that. So if you want year, month, date, British style, Western, etc. We can definitely accommodate that, but for this demo, we'll just go with something pretty simple. So if I were to grab the first one, and look at that created at, and perhaps we want to do updated at, although then it would make the timing, it might make the layout, the ordering look a little strange. It would look like there's May 27th, 29th, 25th. So we'll just go with created at. I'm just going to invoke friendly strift time. And I don't know how anyone could possibly ever remember all of the different strip time opportunities. There we go. I think that's pretty good. That emulates what we have in the announcements tab. And next, pretty simple. We're just going to add those attributes as they are. So .title. And in text, you'll notice that our actual announcements have HTML, which we don't care about here. But I think there is a function to just get the plain text. I'm going to type in plain. And body. Rails action text to plain text. You know what? We're not even using that. We're simply storing it as it is. Okay. This may be not so fun. We may need to sanitize this on the front end. So I can just pass it in what it looks like right now. And let's just go back to calling it body to match the actual schema. And let's see what happens when I try to invoke this from our backend. So let's sync our plugins. The reason I'm syncing our plugins is because this changelog plugin was just added to this immutable file, quasi-immutable file called plugins YAML. This is where we define stuff that doesn't really change. So we can have, drop-down fields that the users can plug in their preferences. So this is where we'd possibly have like a date formatting option. But I'll just go ahead and make this a little bit simpler. Won't even have a knowledge base article. I'm going to now sync those plugins again. And this is basically just doing an upsert into our database, into our plugins table with these attributes. This helps us maintain pretty nice dev prod parity in between machines on the team. We don't have to worry about looking up IDs and expecting objects to exist that don't. This guarantees that this plugin will always be ID 73, for example, in local hosting and on our production server. All right, so now in our plugins marketplace, we should see Changelog with just our default icon. We'll change that later. And this was that API token field, which I failed to sync. So I'm just going to run plugin sync again, see if that drops it. Did not drop it. I think upsert has issues where it can add but not necessarily subtract. But let's just ignore that for now and give this a save. All right, so now I'm going to go in our console and I'm going to grab this plugin instance, a plugin setting. And if I invoke service, that's going to instantiate it inside of here. So you can now see that it has just a few things it can do. I changed our looping there, so. There you can see we have instance methods like limit, announcements, and items, and locals, and that's our whole integration. So if I invoke locals, that's going to produce that JSON that we were using previously on our demo file. So let's go back to our demo file, and I will just paste this in here We'll lint it later, of course, or a little bit right now. And now we have some kind of realistic demo data inside of there. All right, and if our server's running, let's try to reload that page. So here's all of those blank markup files. What we can now do is we can go into changelog full, and let's just try to pull those items in. And there they are. And now we can go back to stealing this content. So all we did here was we switched this to ERB. We don't have closed, but I suspect the styling from this we're stealing from closed has a check mark. So we'll just use the styling for it being open. And maybe we'll get rid of the checkbox altogether. If the task is closed, do gray. We're not going to use any of that. And instead of task.title, we're going to go with news title, but we're going to reference it like this and not with dot notation. Let's see if that gets us a little bit of the way there. Let's see what happens. There we go. We've got a changelog. Let's make this title bar a little bit better. We actually don't need the title bar from the GitHub Issues Builder. We don't really need to have an instance name. And so I'll get rid of that right here. And this is kind of not bad. I think, again, we don't necessarily need this checkbox inside. We could just go with those blocks for now. And since we're probably going to often have a lot of items, I'm going to have this hug the top with layout top. So now we can hold a lot more content. And of course, we're going to need a double up here with the news body. And that doesn't look too bad, but we do need to get rid of this HTML. So I'm going to try a couple things. And there we go. So this extra equals is just a shortcut, I think, for doing something like this, sanitize. And yeah, sanitize rips out tags that may be unsafe. But once you're used to sanitize, you can use a double equals, and it's sort of an alias for that feature. So that's not bad. We may want to include the date, however. So what happens if I were to just put the date in here? It might look quite bad. This isn't really a huge deal. We could also do sort of like days ago. So like 3 days ago, 5 days ago. Not sure. For now, maybe I'll just leave this how it is, or even add maybe like a label underneath all of this that has the date. A little bit big. Not bad. Maybe the label should go up top. Okay, but a little bit distracting visual hierarchy. So let's try to invert the label. Inverse. You should definitely know your tools before you start making videos. Inverted. Okay. It's past tense. It's already happened by the time you see it. So something like this is not horrible. I think we can work with this. Now we need to basically just carry this over to our other layouts. So I'll start with half vertical next, which is down here. You'll notice that I just need this half vertical view at the top. And I want to make sure I did that right. View half. cool. Now here you can see the width is not great. Might need to add some kind of text bleed, or we could just, in this half vertical view, nuke the description, which I think might be a little bit better. Now I'm going to grab this and go into our quadrant view. Not bad. Of course, the height count should be a lot lower. I want to kind of show that there's more going on, and here we go, and one more. I could play with this a little bit to get to fill up a little more room. So now we've got 4, but we're not able to say that there's more. So there's different ways you can do this, obviously. We also could just do nothing, and it will just always show the latest 4, which is fine. And finally, half horizontal. Half horizontal here, what we could do is we could either add back the descriptions because we have the width, which I guess I'll probably do. We also could choose to make this 2 columns, so we have the first 4 and then the last 4. But let's try to just add back the description. So I'll go back up to full, grab that description. And obviously you're noticing quite a bit of duplicate code here. So something we might do later is add more code to this shared block. We can pull these in as partials with this render keyword. But for now, for this demo, I think this is a good way to show how terminal native plugins behave. So I'm going to, just for fun, kill my server, go back into the server, try to set up a new one. I don't know why I'm seeing this account field, but should be a bunch of nothing, but that's all right. So that's about it. And then once we've got our plugin up and running the way we want, I can actually go back to this demo page. We now have access to the Changelog plugin, which we've been looking at. But if I liked this content, I can just go into this gen preview option. And let me make sure I'm running our full process list, image generation, Redis, all that good stuff. And let's try to run gen preview. And that's going to help us find issues, apparently. This is going to be Changelog. Oh, duh. And this is just going to run this demo data through our pipeline and try to create an image that then is able to be, appears on this integrations page, which will be generated as well. So it's going to show up here. It's also going to show up on our native logged in page. So it will show up right here. And that's about it. We just built a plugin showing the terminal changelog. Let's see if I can get it to run on my own account. Looks like I have not given myself developer privileges. So let's set myself to admin. And now I should have a force refresh option. And there we go. So we've just generated our first instance. We're going to use this as that preview image. And we've built a native plugin from scratch in just a few minutes. Hope this was interesting to watch. Looking forward to seeing what you build. And remember to stay focused. Ciao.